Welcome, I'm Crispy, and thanks for clicking on my video. As you can tell, there's been a few changes around here. I've been trying out a few things, changed the name of the channel in order so that perhaps it could be a little easier to find. I did not realize when I started off this YouTube experiment that, and I should have done this, but I just didn't think of it. There's already a fairly sizable channel that has the Crispy moniker on it and is focused a little differently than where I'm focused. And I think it was a little hard to perhaps find this channel, and I'd love to have more people in the conversation. So I with some help of some very kind individuals that have much more experience when it comes to making YouTube channels and marketing and social media stuff and things that I'm really not that well versed on. They provided me with some suggestions, and I'm very happy to try it out. And my wife was very kind. She suggested that a green screen might be something that we could try, and we're trying it out. And now I'm learning that it's not just something as simple as, well, we'll just add a green screen. No. No, you have to now understand proper studio lighting and how to get a even light on the green screen so that you don't get as much artifacting. And you probably can see a little bit of artifacting around my head and other places, but I'm completely new at this. I appreciate your patience as we try. I'm trying out a few things and having fun with it, seeing how it works. I had my in-person game last night, and there were 3 takeaways from my session last night. One of them is more of a personal development thing I need to work on as I try to be more role-play focused, but also improve my craft as someone who's running games. And as the game master, I have always struggled as a game master to embrace the idea of downtime. As soon as the adventure hits a bit of a lull, I'm immediately inclined to, and I don't know if this is me just being impatient, but I tend to immediately go into this panic of, I've got to get something else going right away. And so part of this may have come from an experience I had many years ago when we were running a game, different system, more of a Pathfinder D&D 3.5 system. And there was some of this classes there were using the crafting to really break the game. Now, I understand that may just have been my inexperience at the time, rearing its ugly head, that I didn't realize that maybe there were already some let's say system imposed limitations on crafting rules. But it seemed to me like that particular archetype that was using the crafting, this kind of master alchemist, he was able, if he had any downtime at all, he would make an absolutely insane number of potions and mixtures and all of these things that he could then just use willy-nilly. It was almost game breaking. And my solution to that was just, well, I'm just going to keep them on their toes all the time. As soon as some downtime appeared, I would immediately fill it with conflict. Now, that's not an ideal situation, and I'm not recommending you do what I did. I think that's a bit of a mistake that I've fallen into over time. I'm going to share a resource that I'm going to try with my Weird Frontiers game, and this is actually a mechanic from Savage Worlds. And it's called the Interlude system. I'm just going to bring it up here. Interludes is an idea where there's a little bit of randomness to it. Now, Weird Frontiers uses a deck of cards, so it's not that much of a stretch to have these cards. Now, Savage Worlds also uses cards quite extensively, also dice. The idea behind an interlude is that the player can draw a card from a deck, and depending on the suit of the card, they'll have a choice between 3 different things. And you can see here, if, for example, I drew for my interlude, and the idea here is that it's a time for players to catch their breath, they get into their character, they can explain a little bit of what either the character's backstory, something that happened to them, but more the thinking behind this, as I understand it, is that it's more something, okay, what has happened since our last adventure? What has happened since the resolution of that conflict that we had a week ago or in real time. Perhaps it was a couple months ago in game time. And so you get this idea here where, hey, if I draw a spade, I can choose one of these three things. And then I, as the player, can talk a little bit about what happened to my character in that intervening time. We're going to try this out. This was something that we did use when we were playing Savage Worlds for our first time as something just to see how it worked out. And it was okay. The problem that we had with it is that there was a tendency to really skimp on the details here, just to say, well, here, I'll just kind of reuse the same idea again and again and again. And as I reuse that, I just do that so that I can get an in-game benefit. And I think the idea here is it's more of a something to spark some creativity, hopefully. So that's what we're going to try. So this is the Interludes system. You can see the basics there, as I kind of pointed out. But the basics is just to tell a story from the character's point of view. And then there is an in-game reward for doing that. So we're going to try that out and see how it works. It's just to try to get me thinking more of giving some breathing room between major conflicts as part of an overall, as the adventure continues and things happen. But there's time. It's actually valuable, I think. I'm not good at this. I'm still learning this. I think it is valuable to give some breathing time, some air between major events. And that's probably more realistic within the fictional world. And I want to create a world that, as a simulation, this world is believable. Now, it's still fantastic. I'm not suggesting it's, we're not trying to be ultra realistic here. That's not what I meant. What I mean is, it's not probably, even in a fantastic setting, it's probably not the case that every day of the week there's a new massive event that happens. So on Monday it's the mine collapse. On Tuesday it's the bandits that raid the town. On Wednesday, you get what I'm saying? Wednesday it's a demonic entity that burns down the jail, and those kind of things where if it's all, the proximity time-wise is so close, it starts to become a bit ridiculous. I have an example of that. We played an adventure path once, and what was the name of the town? It was the Rise of the Rune Lords adventure path, which is, I have some issues with adventure paths. I have to be perfectly frank. The problem I have with adventure paths is that when it was the first time running an adventure path like that, I had always just kind of came up with my own thing. But I saw this adventure path and it was highly recommended by everyone or most people that had run it. And so we tried running it, and it just seemed so contrived to me that the way everything was strung together. And it was just because I was holding too tightly to the reins. I think the idea behind an adventure path is that you use it as inspiration, but you're not locked in to that adventure path, if that makes sense. At any rate, there was this place where it was kind of the base of operations for the character. I believe it was called Sandpoint. And it's just all of these things happening in Sandpoint all the time. And it was like, eventually I think one of the players said this. He just said, why don't these people just move? Like, this is just the worst place ever. Everything bad happens here. Like, can't they just move? It was I'm getting images of, Patrick Starr just saying, well, we'll just move, we'll just push Bikini Bottom over there and that'll solve all of our problems. And, maybe, who knows, maybe it would. So I'm not sure how I got onto that topic. At any rate, this is something I'm going to have to work on some more. I'm just not good at it. I shared that with the players. I said, look, I was trying this week to do a kind of downtime session, or at least for maybe half an hour or 40 minutes within our game time, maybe even less than that, just go through and see, okay, what transpired? Like, we're 2 months down the road. What has your character been up to? Like, so 2 months later, we find, Noah and Naomi. Tell us where you are. Like, what is transpired in the last 2 months, and just let the players riff on that. Although I think that is also going to require quite a bit of practice from the player side too, because it does require some creativity on the spot, perhaps. Anyway, so something I'm working on, this Interludes, may want to try something like that. Could be worth giving it a shot. The other takeaway, so this is number 2, is and I think this was really good feedback from a player. So I had decided that we're starting off resolving a cliffhanger. The cliffhanger was a massive earthquake that had started, which the players, at least those that had survived, knew it wasn't tectonic plates shifting. It wasn't one of the fault lines letting loose. No, it was a massive or gargantuan sized threat underneath the city. And they knew that this earthquake wasn't actually just a geologic event. It was a monstrous event. And we started with that. So it was a great, impactful, exciting thing happening. They're on the street, there's buildings falling all around, there's people screaming, and all sorts of things happening. I have something grilling. Excuse me. And I think we're back. Yeah, I think we're back. Sorry about that. Got some burnt ends that I'm doing on the grill, and they're kind of a time-intensive cook, but yeah, they look pretty good. Hopefully they turn out. So where I was talking is I had this big event happening, and there was lots of conflict, and then on top of that conflict, there's some enemies that are shooting at them, and then there's this big monster, of course, the big thing that comes out from underground and is the one that's responsible for all of this mayhem. And they have all of that going on. And I was describing a lot of things happening in the narrow scope of where they were. And I think actually what happened is I almost overwhelmed the players. I gave the scope. I tried to create this image in their minds of just pandemonium all around them, even with the limited areas that they can see. So I'm not describing the whole city and what's happening there. I'm just talking about what they can see. But there's so much they can see that there was perhaps a bit of a camera focus issue. We can only really concentrate on a limited number of things at one time. And I think I hit that limit. I limited out, perhaps. I had done a little too much. And I think it was to the detriment of the overall experience. If I had been a little more focused on the immediate threat right then, right there, just get that focus, I should say, right down tight instead of having it be just a little too broad. And I was trying to be limited to really just what they would see. I wasn't going beyond what they could see. But nevertheless, it was some feedback from a player that said, that was great. I enjoyed a lot of what was going on, but I almost felt like there was too much going on. And I think that's a fair feedback. There's that's something to be said about having the conflict be intense, but a little more limited. Perhaps it's more of what the expression was. It was quality over quantity. It was just something really cool happening right here rather than everything around me going insane all at once. It's just a little too much. The last thing I wanted to talk about, and this is a bit of a criticism to Weird Frontiers. I really enjoy Westerns. Our whole gaming group has been surprised at how much enjoyment we're getting out of Weird Frontiers. However, I think that Weird Frontiers, and perhaps other games too, Weird Frontiers would benefit from everyone at the table having read the entire book, and that's a big ask. This is a 900-page volume. The reason why I'm struggling a little bit with Weird Frontiers right now is that even classes that you would think would be relatively straightforward have a significant number of charts to look things up. I'm going to show you just one of the wondrous items that our Bedlamite has. So a Bedlamite's like this mad well, not a mad, they're not, there's nothing mad about them. The Bedlamite is an inventor of sorts that can use his new magical abilities to empower wondrous creations. However, every time he does this, every time he activates one of his wondrous creations, and this is a bit of a feature, it's not necessarily always a downfall. The problem we're having is that if you have an occultist, so that's like a wizard of sorts, and you have a Bedlamite, and then you add some gunslingers, and then you have on top of that we have a Montebank. This is someone that's like an alchemist, snake oil salesman, but he also has these concoctions that he can make. Every class has these, almost every class, I suppose, even the wrestlers, the luchadors, they have lookup tables. And what I'm struggling with, I'm going to share this with you if I can, just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So this is one of the wondrous items that the Bedlamite has. It's called a wound stitcher. It's a fantastic device. It's very useful. And this wound stitcher, whenever he uses this wound stitcher, he has to roll. And depending on what he rolls, he'll either have a minor malfunction, a failure, or something like that, or it'll activate, but it activates depending on how well he rolls. And you can see here as I scroll down, there's 2 full pages of well, there's some artwork here, but there's 2 pages of this. And it can slow things quite a bit, especially if there's a limited number of copies of the, like, I'm trying not to, as much as possible, I don't want to be in the book at all. When we start our game session, I tell the players, I'm like, I'm not looking anything up, but I can't. The problem is that the players have to look these things up. And this is just one of several. Like, he has, how many does he have? I think he has 6 wondrous items that he has on him. Now, he can't have all of them active all at the same time, but each one of his things has something like this. So, like, for example, this other one, so this is a harness that he can have, and it has different, but again, you roll, and then there's this huge lookup chart to see what happens with it. This is part of the DCC shtick, which is there's an element of unpredictability when it comes to using magic. And I like that. I do. I'm not trying to knock the whole thing. The problem is that unless everyone has read and really spent the time studying these things, you will inevitably, all of us are stuck looking up, okay, I roll this, now I have to refer to the chart to see what happens. And that slows things down substantially. It's much, much slower than I would prefer. Now, I'm not trying to be just hand wave combat or other things either, but there needs to be a bit of a balance. And the issue is that there's just so many lookup charts. If I can, let me see. What I'll do is perhaps I can just show you one other thing from the Weird Frontiers book. And again, I like the system, and we've played DCC, we've played MCC, which is Mutant Crawl Classics, it's kind of wild and crazy. It was okay. I prefer Weird Frontiers over MCC for several reasons, but it's just there's a lot of things. I'm going to look here. There's so many tables is the problem I'm having. So if we look at, oh boy, what I was trying to do is just show you the significant number of, let's see here. Yeah, here we go. So if I look at critical hit and fumbled charts, so I'm going to show this to you. And I just want to give you an idea. I'm not going to show all of them to you, but I just want to show some so you can understand what I'm talking about. These are critical hits and fumble charts, and you'll see the first one is blunt. So there's there's different critical hits depending on the type of weapon you're using. There's also fumble charts depending on the type of weapon that you're using. This is just one of them. You can see here, there's a total of, what is it here for blunt? 2 full pages up to 30. So there's 30 separate entries here. The character will roll, the player will roll on this if they get a critical with the blunt weapon, and then they would refer to this chart. And then it's wild and crazy, but it's also very slow because we're stopping to look these things up. And that's just one. So like there's blunt, here's firearms. This is a really important one. There's 30 entries there. There's 30 entries for piercing and so on. There's one for wrestling. There's, there's lots and lots and lots of these, and they're very inventive. They're interesting, but it takes a lot of time to resolve this. And you may say, well, that's just because, it's a critical, why not spend some time looking this up? That's true. And I appreciate that. This is supposed to be a big deal when this happens. But this isn't the only time that you're going to be referring to these charts. As I showed earlier, every time that you activate an item, or you cast a spell or some kind of incantation, or you use one of the potions that the Montebank has available to them, every time you have to look this up. And I'm finding it a little tiresome. So going to have to try to figure out a way. I think that this is one of those, it's pushing me, I feel, a little more towards a system that isn't so chart driven. I do like the variety of success, the overwhelmingly successful, somewhat successful, somewhat of a failure, a total failure, however many ones you have. I like that. So it's not just a yes, no, all the time. I do like the idea that there's some variety in the results, but boy, it's just a lot. It's a lot to keep track of. And I'm one of the few that actually has copies of all of these things. So if the players want to use it, there's just not that many copies available. And there are some, like there's the Crawler Companion, which works really well for DCC, which is an app that you have to have on your phone. But again, I'm trying to get people out of their device. I don't want people in their phone. I know my players are, well, I suspect my players are still paying attention. They're not just, checking their Twitter feed or whatever it is, that they're actually looking up a reference manual or something like that online. But I'd rather have their eyes up. I want them looking at each other. I want them looking at me if I'm speaking, so I can tell that they're listening. Maybe that's a throwover from a previous career or something. But at any rate, that's a bit of a struggle I'm having. I'm not quite sure what to do about it. I did, print off some charts for them, so they have them. They're there. They have their own copy, but that's also a bit of a problem, because I don't want them just fiddling around with papers. I want them involved, thinking of what they're going to do next, like excited for what's going to happen. So those are the 3 things that my takeaways from our last night's session. What do you do about downtime? How can you make that flow easier? We're going to try the interlude thing just to try to see if players can start becoming creative with it. I have to figure out a way of not getting so anxious just because there's not some major event happening at every moment of the game. But I also don't want to just sit around while people are twiddling their thumbs as to, well, what are we doing next? I don't know. Well, I guess I'll go and, I'm going to spend all my time just at the tavern, at the saloon, or I'm going to just go play cards for 2 months. Well, I don't know. It seems a little weak sauce. And the idea that, it can have a very chaotic scope of what's going on, but focusing in on one particular major problem at a time perhaps is better. My idea was that I wanted to have, in my defense, I wanted to have a lot of things that the players could choose to interact with or not. And rather than just pointing the camera at this, and this is the conflict I want you to resolve. I don't want to fall into that trap where I'm just, okay, obviously I want you to do this next, and then maybe this other thing, and just forget about all the rest. I don't want that. And then finally, this excessive amounts of charts. Like, what do we do with all these charts? There's so many, and they're great. Like, you read through them and you're like, oh, this is really inventive, and look at the creativity here. But it just means that it's virtually impossible to know what your character can do and just keep all of that in your head. You have to have the reference there in front of you, and it's unpredictable, and I love it for its unpredictability, but it just drags at times. So those are my takeaways from the session last night. Had a lot of fun. Smaller group, thankfully. I think it did work better having just 3 players, but certainly missed some of our other players that weren't there, because they're usually really passionate. The 2 players that were absent are some of our most passionate players. So that was unfortunate they couldn't be there, but it's summer and things happen. Hopefully next time we'll have a full complement, and we'll see how it goes. Please leave your feedback. Tell me what you think of this whole green screen thing, and what you think of that. I'd be curious to know if it works for you. I'm thinking it might be nicer, instead of just having a black background, to have a bit of a graphic or some kind of artwork or something behind that's evocative of a Wild West RPG or something like that. Always open to suggestions. So thanks for watching this video, and I'll look forward to talking to you on the next one. Thanks. Bye.